I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. It's been just over a week since the USMNT won their two-legged Nations League quarterfinal against Trinidad and Tobago. With that win, they advanced to the Nations League semifinals and also qualified for the Copa America next year. The team won't play again in 2023, and so I thought it would be a good time to look back on the past year and discuss some of the highlights, some of the things that went well, and maybe some areas where we'd still like to see some improvement. To help me talk through those things today, I've invited Brian Shretta to join the show. Brian is a writer at American Soccer Now. His work also appears in various newspapers across the country, and he's a frequent guest on Talk Sport and Sirius XM. Brian, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me back, Frank. I appreciate it.
So I want to just start with maybe some positives. I'd like to hear what you think the high point was for this USMNT in 2023, whether it was your favorite moment, whether it was their biggest accomplishment. I mean, what stands out to you as the high point for the team in the past year?
I think winning the Nations League again was clearly a high point for this team. After that, it gets kind of murky in terms of like a second cycle under the same coach kind of routine where it seems like there's not much change going on. But winning the Nations League final against Mexico, and then the semi against Mexico, excuse me, and then the final against Canada. I think that those were very good things for the team, and now it's really just setting the stages for 2024, where you have the Nations League again, the Copa America, and the Olympics. So it's a busy year in 2024 where we're going to learn a lot more next year compared with this year. This was kind of this wasn't as an eventful year as next year will be for sure.
Yeah, it did feel like everything's kind of building up towards next year. But I agree with you. The high point for me, and I'll break it down even like a more specific point, but it was June 15th, that Mexico Nations League semifinals, where I'm always fired up when the U.S. is going to play Mexico in an elimination game. And so there was that kind of excitement all day. And then, during the pregame, during the warm-ups is when it leaked about Berhalter, getting rehired. And so that's kind of going on at the same time. And then we beat Mexico thoroughly 3-0. And so that was a fun night for me in the past year.
Yeah, it was. That was certainly eventful. It was like news was coming in all over the place, look, I mean, for the most part, I think it was a little bit of a tougher year in terms of maybe not so much the team, but I don't think it was a positive year in terms of club performances and stuff along that regard. It just kind of sets up, a 2024 where, you got to start seeing some more progress at the club level. That's really apart from the full national team, whether it be in central defense. Too many guys are not playing and too many young guys aren't emerging. And where are the minutes going to come for some of these people? There's really not as many young players who are really excelling for both club and country. It's the closest are like Pulisic and Anthony Robinson. Besides that, it's kind of just it's a little lackluster right now. Musa's starting to change things a little bit, but we'll see moving into 2024 whether players can find that sweet spot where they're quietly doing well for both club and country. That was when the U.S. national team in previous years was always at its best, when guys like Bocanegra and Cherundolo, and you can kind of make like a long list of players where there was that kind of continuity and consistency. We really haven't seen that yet from this group of players, and it makes things tough to predict when you don't know what kind of form they're going to enter into when they join the full national team for any specific camp.
Yeah, and so I definitely want to spend some time kind of looking ahead to what needs to improve for next year. Before we do that, let me ask you a few more things about this past year. I mean, if you had to identify maybe an area of growth for the team in 2023 in the past year, what's an area you think you saw some growth?
Yeah, I think that they were starting to get settled in the striker position pretty well. It was always a lot of turnover there. I think when you look at like turnover, they didn't know if it was going to be Sargent or Ferreira or Haji, right, or PFOC, in last year, and right now, I think they've, for better for worse, at least they've settled in on a group. The Balogun and Pepe duo is kind of brings some kind of continuity and consistency to it. It's still not perfect. Balogun seems like he still has a long ways to go in terms of developing chemistry with this team, and Pepe still has a ways to go before he gets regular minutes with PSV. But at least it's some kind of continuity and consistency with that team, and then obviously too, another good thing is that Christian Pulisic, regardless of whatever's going on with his club team, still seems to be a guy who delivers in big games for the national team, and whether it be that Nations League final or even in the friendly against Germany, he still is that guy that you want to have out there on the field. So, despite whatever's going on in his club situation, it wasn't always pretty. So, those are just two areas I think are pretty good for the national team right now.
Yeah, it did seem after the World Cup last year that everybody was saying striker was this huge need for us. It was like one of the biggest missing pieces for us to grow. And now here we are, like a year later, and not saying we can't continue to improve there, but Balogun and Pepe seem to have a pretty kind of strong hold on that position. Do you think there's any chance that someone like Sargent or somebody else could supplant them
Yeah,
next year?
absolutely. I mean, look, it's a fluid situation. Balogun had a poor camp, I think, in November. His touch was off. He was missing chances, and I think the leash is pretty long for him. But it's not like something that can ever be changed to. And Pepe's still young, and he doesn't play for his club or like meaningful minutes. And that's something that could always change things. And of course, Sargent's going to come back from injury. I think he could be an Olympic overage option. Duncan McGuire's doing very well here. I think another one you want to keep an eye on is Brandon Vasquez. I think he's poised right now to make a move to Europe after this season, and I think that will happen. And with Vasquez, it's if he goes and catches fire and starts doing well, he's back in the mix. I think part of the problem is, and that's a good thing. One thing you don't want with this team is to have many settled positions. You don't want people who are untouchable. You want to have people that have feel the fire of needing to perform well to be called up. That's all very, very healthy. And certainly I think there's going to be more scoring options that are going to continue to push those center forwards as it should be. So yeah, by no means do I think that Pepe and Balogun are, etched in, pen and can never be erased from, or to be taken out of the equation. I think, nothing's ever settled for a team that's still has yet to accomplish much of anything.
Yeah, you're right. All it takes is one of those guys to get hot, and yeah, that would be a good problem to have if that happens. What about an area? I guess being more critical of the team, maybe finding like some negatives. Is there an area of the team that you felt like recessed or maybe stagnated this year, or a low point?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of them, unfortunately, probably more negatives than positives in that regard. And before we get into the specifics, I'll just kind of gloss over them. No one's playing in goal. Turner's benched. Horvath is benched. Steffen's out. Slonin is playing, but he's just a kid. I don't think you want to have a 19-year-old as your number one. I think that there's still no backup to Tyler Adams, and now that Tyler Adams, and we knew that going into last cycle, but the only thing is Tyler was healthy last cycle. Now that he's not healthy, you're starting to see some real problems with not having backup options there. Center back is look, unfortunately, Tim Ream is, look, he had another tough game today, gave up a penalty. I think things, age will eventually defeat him. He's aged very well, but that might be something that they might have to realize is happening sooner than later. And center backs, there's just not enough playing options, whether it be Chris Richards or we don't know what's going to happen with Miles Robinson. His season in Atlanta wasn't great. It's Mark McKenzie still not involved with that team as much as they would hope. And you can kind of go through the list of things. Serginho Dest has got his problems. I mean, he's a hothead. He was sent off twice this year. I don't know. It's unfortunately for me. It's there's more areas of concern there, but I would look at center back as probably being chief among them. There's just nothing settled back there, and then kind of look up towards goalkeeping and back up to Tyler. Those are all pretty serious issues there. Even more so than Dest. So they're not getting enough goals from the midfield, and they need more competition in some of those backup midfield positions. But they need more playmakers, and Gio's not playing. You could just make. Unfortunately, the list is very long.
Let's dig into center back, a little bit, because I've heard you kind of mention this before as kind of a big weakness or opportunity for this team, and there seems to be a lot of names at center back, a lot of center backs playing in Europe, a lot of young talent kind of coming up. So do you think it's a matter of we don't actually have the talent, or do you think it's just that none of these guys are getting regular minutes?
Well, look, I think it's twofold. I don't think there's a lot of talent coming up in center back right now. I think there's a lot of talent coming up in other positions, but not so much center back. I wrote a big feature about this last month about the lack of center backs at the U23 level, players born 2001 and after, guys who will be turning 23 years old in the next calendar year. There's only 3 guys in that age range playing first team minutes, MLS or anywhere in Europe or South America, anywhere in a first team league, not including USL, but MLS or anywhere in Europe in a first division league. 3 guys, that's it.
And who are those 3?
Jalen Neal for the Galaxy. He played a little bit for the national team this year. Early on, you got George Campbell in Montreal. He was on the last U23 camp. And Maximilian Dietz, who's at Greuther Fürth in the 2 Bundesliga, teammates with Julian Green. He played for the US U17 at a World Cup team, and he's also on the US U23 team. Aside from those 3, that's it. There's no other guys playing regularly. So it's led like the full national team to kind of really have a stagnant group of player pool, and now and it might shrink as like guys like Tim Ream and maybe some others start aging out. So it's the same, and then obviously Zimmerman's 30, Long's 30, Brooks is 30, and they're just starting a cycle. So 30's not old, but it's not a great place to be starting a cycle. So, you start looking at that, it's just the same group of players. And it's really kind of been like this for about 3 or 4 years where no one within that group, whether it be Richards, McKenzie, now it's Trusty, I guess he's kind of put himself in that mix, Miles Robinson, Cameron Carter-Vickers, this list is just kind of, no one's really emerged from that list to kind of stand out and be like, look, I'm the guy, and it's just been a lot of parity and no real standouts. So, and unfortunately, no young guys are kind of emerging behind that. I think that's a problem with the Olympic team. They're allowed 3 overage players, and they're probably going to have to use 2 of those overage spots on center backs. That doesn't reflect well on the current situation. So, yeah, if you want to start with center backs, I don't think there's a lot of young players coming up through the mix, and it's kind of led things to be stagnant. Look, I think Greg Berhalter sent a little bit of a message to Chris Richards by not playing him in this camp, because it's like saying, look, you're good enough to get called on. I like you, but you're not playing at all. So, and you haven't been playing for a long time. It's been a long time since he's played regularly. I mean, because he was injured for the second half of his last season with Hoffenheim, so it's been over almost 2 years since he's played regularly. There's a little bit of a message there, and that's a good thing. But at the same point, too, you'd like to be able to have a message backed up by like a whole bunch of people behind him who are knocking on the door, and you just don't have that in central defense. So yeah, it is a stagnant area of the team, and something that they desperately need some new faces.
Yeah, center back, that's always a position, I watch closely when, the roster comes out, each call up, and when the starting lineups come out, because it does seem to be so unsettled. So we've mentioned a number of players so far, and I wanted to kind of in this next maybe 5 minutes or so do a stock up, stock down on some players in the team over the past year. So who's a player whose stock you think has gone up this year?
Look, I think Anthony Robinson is just a model of consistency for club and country right now. He's the one guy. He's like him and Christian Pulisic are the guys you want to point to and say, we can just depend on these people. Like those two guys are right there in terms of being dependable and consistently good for club and country. It's like some guys are pretty good for the national team just about every time they're there. But a guy like Tim Weah, look, Tim Weah is going to be 24. He's never played a 2,000-minute season at the club level of his career. So there's always a little something missing in terms of some of these guys, in terms of where they're playing and how much they're playing and well. But like Robinson, I think is just there, and I think you're putting Musa there too in terms of a stock up because his he's made the move to AC Milan, and I think without question, with Pioli there and how he sees him, it's a successful move so far. He's starting. He's playing big games for them. He's well liked. He's so young still. I think he's in a great position. So if you want to talk, and I think Christian's move to AC Milan has been a success too. I think those three are big stocks up, and Weston's in a good spot too. I because just mostly because of low expectations on his return to Juventus. I thought it was leading towards another loan, or probably try to look to a transfer. But somehow he's gotten back into Allegri's good graces more than I thought he was going to, and he's having a good season with Juventus. I think that those guys are stock ups with so McKennie, Pulisic, Jedi, and Musa, without a doubt, are the stock ups.
Yeah, if you would have told me this summer that Wes McKennie was gonna, stay with Juventus, start at right wing back, and then eventually work his way back into the starting midfield, I wouldn't have believed you. But I mean, he is having a great year. What about a player whose you feel like their stock has gone down this year?
I mean, I think Matt Turner's obvious because it's just now he's lost his starting job again. You don't know what it's going to take to get it back. I don't think Nottingham Forest wants to move him. They need a backup goalie. It's just because. I mean, look, Ethan Horvath's stock is tumbled too, and he's not even in the mix of anything. But Turner's supposed to be the number one, and he had the starting job, and he lost it. So, yeah, you can't say anything that's positive there. I think with Chris Richards, he had a good Nations League, but at the same point, there's the minutes just aren't there at the club level, and at some point that has to change. No matter, even if you had a good Nations League, it's like you can't just keep living off performances that are now several months old or better part of a year old. Those are guys I think the stock's down. Dest is having a nice season at PSV, I think, but he's ending the year on a negative note with 2 red cards. He'll still be in the mix. He's still talented. He hasn't fallen as much as the other guys. Then you have a bunch of guys who were given a chance in 2023 and didn't take it, like Alan Sonora. I know he still was called up recently, but I don't know if Zendejas is he looks like he's a guy who could be pushed out if someone starts getting hot. Alan Sonora was they tried to give a look to, and I know he was a popular choice for some, and he didn't really take it. So those are all stock downs, but I think you got to look at the guys who clearly they want to be part of the program, and big parts of the program, and Turner and Richards and those guys it just didn't really work out for those guys, and the door's still open for them at any point to return to a very, very big role. But I think if you were to tell anyone that at the start of the year that neither of them would be playing and they would be kind of glued to the bench at their clubs, I don't think they'd be happy with it.
Let me ask you about a few other players I'm curious about. The first is Joe Scally. Do you think his stock has gone up or down in the past year?
It's kind of stayed neutral. Like, look, I think he's benefited, unfortunately, to a really tough situation at Gladbach. I mean, when I think he was not coming into the season as the starter and then starting right back, he lost his job at the end of the season. Last season, he didn't play the last 5 games. And then the starting right back ended up getting leukemia right before the start of the season. And it pushed Joe back into the starting job. It was a really sad situation, but I mean, so he's kind of come back in. He's done okay. He's had some good performances, some not good performances. It's been a tough season for Gladbach. They don't have much money. I don't know. I mean, he's the right back. He's the backup right back right now, and left back, but and a left back option. But he's a guy who could be overtaken if someone else gets hot and does well. He's another one of these unconvincing backups that I think need to be challenged more on the U.S. national team, like guys like him, Luca De La Torre, other guys along those roles who need to feel some kind of pressure. But yeah, I think it's really neutral to say, but it could have been worse. But you don't want to say like it's been a great situation just because the situation why he kept starting is so sad.
Yeah. What about Malik Tillman?
Uh, and I think it's moderate, more of the same. He still hasn't grasped the starting job at PSV, but PSV's perfect on the season. He's had some good moments in the Eredivisie, but one where PSV is so much talented, more talented than everybody else. I mean, where they got perfect 39 points from 13 games to start the season. That's pretty outstanding. So, yeah, I think he's looked the part in some of these Eredivisie games, but and sometimes he looks really, really good out there. He just needs to get consistency and he needs to play more. I mean, again, stock neutral. It's neither up or down.
I've seen him playing well at PSV. Haven't had that many moments with the U.S. men's national team that I think he's performed well, and that's I'd like to see him start performing better. When he gets a chance with the USMNT.
Yeah, look, he's a guy that I think is needs to be pushed, and you want to see some more guys from the Olympic team emerge. To like I said, I start coming up with a list of guys like Scally, De La Torres, and Tejas. Put Tillman right there in terms of guys you want to see on that Olympic team be hungry and want their chances and want to use it and make the most of their opportunities. And Tillman's a guy. Look, unless he really starts making the most of some of these opportunities and someone on the Olympic team goes to Paris and starts lighting it up, like especially in the attacking midfield, like he's not in an untouchable position on the national team. So at some point in 2024, he's really going to need to put it together.
Okay, so you mentioned the Olympics. We've talked about that a few times. Let's kind of talk about these next 6-7 months ahead of us. We have 2 big competitions, the Copa America and the Olympics, coming up in those 6 to 7 months. I mean,
yeah, and the Nations League too. Yeah,
and the Nations League. What do you think needs to change or improve with the team as we get ready for those competitions?
Well, Berhalter's been pretty clear, and I like this, that he wants the player pools between the Olympic team and the senior team to kind of merge after the Olympics, which would be kind of in September. He wants to take, I think, the best, right now they're trying to fill out two rosters, and then it's going to come down to one roster after that. And he wants to see more internal competition. Look, the 2022-2023 European club season wasn't good for American players by large part. And I think what he wants is, these more good players in better situations to choose from, and less automatic players, and less guys who are completely secure of their spots. I think, you need more internal competition. I think you saw it at the World Cup last year when Berhalter was really, he was set on his 11 and then maybe a couple subs after that, and it got like 13, 14 deep. He needs to get it up into like 20, 21, 22 guys that he's really comfortable with. And, you're going to need more pushing and more competition, and reasons why, like guys who are just starting, they're called up just because they're playing, and regardless of whether or not they're playing well, it's like you want to raise that bar in terms of having, like more inform and impact level players to choose from. And then you just need to get some guys that he really likes on the field. That's really what he just needs to see. And you got to hope the Olympics kind of light the fire in terms of, expanding that player pool. It's very, very important to do so, to have another kind of global competition like that. These Olympics and the Copa America are going to test our youth and our senior national team outside of the CONCACAF borders, both within the matter of 2 months of each other. That's just a tremendous opportunity to find out, like, who's made of what, and who's ready. Because look, if some guy goes on the Olympic team and scores a bunch of goals and it really impresses on that standard, it's going to be impossible to leave him off the full national team, right? And then that means someone's going to get bumped from the full national team. So you want to see more of this jockeying for positions right now, because I think some of these guys are comfortable getting called up repeatedly, regardless of how they're playing or not playing at all.
So I know you follow this Olympic team like really closely. I mean, who do you think are some of the favorites from that team to possibly, have a breakthrough and use that as a kind of a leapfrog to the full men's national team?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm going to be in Paris next year covering the team. So yeah, there's a reason why I'm paying attention to it. I think John Tolkien at left back is a guy who can really push Lund out and be the backup to Anthony Robinson, which they need. I think there's three excellent goalkeepers in Gaga Slonina, Patrick Schulte, and Chris Brady, who, look, they play regularly. They play more than the top three on the full national the Olympic options last year. Not the Olympics, I'm sorry, the World Cup trio last year. They're already, playing more than those guys. I think Paxton Aronson is a guy that they really want to be, a winger on that team. And I really, really liked what I saw from Aiden Morris the last couple months in the playoffs with Columbus. I think that's a ball-winning, physical presence in the midfield that, he's still just 21. He recovered from an ACL and tear in 2021, and he won the MLS Cup in 2020. And he's, like I said, he's done a lot in his career so far. I think he's looking for a big move. Those are, a couple of guys that I think are, ready now more than others. I think also with Joe Scally, if he doesn't improve, and you could look at an option such as Brian Reynolds, who I think will be on the Olympic team as the right back. He's a guy who could push Joe Scally, eventually. So, and another one, you don't know if Kevin Paredes, who played for the national team last window, but he might come down to the Olympic team if he's released and really get a chance to play a lot and showcase himself. And Rokas Pukas, who starts for Hajduk Split, he hasn't made a U23 appearance yet. He was on the U20 World Cup team over the summer. He's a guy too that's looking very, very promising. So, those are just some of the names I'm thinking of with this team that, I think it could be a good team. I'm looking for, and Bernard Kamungo I want to single out too, because he's just got a great story, and a refugee, born in a refugee camp in Tanzania. He's looked good for the 23s too, and for FC Dallas, and just got a great story. And I mean, he was playing with a makeshift balls until he was like 13, 14 years old, until he immigrated to the United States. So there's a lot of good players there too. I'm interested to see how it comes together under head coach Marko Mitrovic, but very, very important to the full national team in terms of building up depth to the national team, which it very much needs.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for all that information and for coming back on the show again. I'll make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at Brian Sharetta, and also to your work at American Soccer Now. Before I let you go, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
They announced today that they'll be playing Slovenia to open up 2024 in San Antonio. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And it's going to be a very young squad, and it's a good way to kick off the year with they said looks like they're going to try to go young with that team. So I'm looking forward to I think that's the right approach, and looking forward to it all.
Yeah, we're getting all these Texas games. I should be able to go. I was able to go to the one in Austin. I should be able to go to the San Antonio game as well.
Good for you.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on.
And thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a fellow USMNT fan. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at Frank Garza 007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.